near Lake Superior. So keep that in mind as you're listening along. So Sleeper Lake Fire. A tree was burning in my dream. When I woke, a whole forest burned, though only smoke shouldered through the near woods. In the dream, the tree quavered with birds clustered above flames climbing the bark. Off-white birds, what kind I couldn't tell you. Some things drift from a dream. Though, when I started to smoke skulking through the house, part of me still heard the tree, its earful of panic. Paper torn into chatter. Wings like little doors popping open. But I wanted to listen to the house blue with smoke and the windows open mouth. Something was catching up with us. A wildfire, the radio repeated in its obvious way. Same story for days. The wind has always blown another way. Winds turn, proverbial. Flames burn what they can. Here, jack pines and scrub, one tree, then others, junk pines good only for paper and fire, all primed to give up their gangly, fast-growing limbs. Succession. Yesterday, I broke char from a stump, scorched to a socket. How long ago, in a backwoods of another century, I couldn't say. I gave it to my daughter to draw a sun and a house and dark birds, a black tree and a black lake. She taped her picture on her wall and called it Sleeper Lake, after the new name the radio mutters these days, after the body of water curled in on itself like a sleeping child as the helicopters pass over, dangling the orange blisters they mean to spill onto what they can't put out. When fire took the low branches, the birds flurried higher, but wouldn't fly, wouldn't trust the sky with its smoke-chalked sun. They crowded boughs, tilting back toward flames open as palms, but I was elsewhere, already halfway outside the dream. The radio warned us to pack, to bring our photos to the door, our living and dead. The time might come untangling through the jack pines and scrub from the lakeside, dry as felt, where the sleeper turned in her narrow shores. When my daughter wanted a song before sleep, the radio wouldn't sing. When she wanted to flush a fear that wouldn't leave its perch, she asked, "Will you wake me when the fire comes?" Her drawing fluttered above her bed, a present or future or illegible past lifting from the wall like a wing. Once there was no house. Once there was no bed and no child to sleep in it. No window left open all night. Once another tree burned and birds startled at the sudden blaze, handfuls of ruckus thrashing into a night torn between the sky and the dark page lapping below, where the fire doubled and grew wilder, like a dream of itself coming true. Okay, just a couple more poems here. This is the Black Bear at closing. The bear presses her shoulder to the glass of her enclosure in the bluing light and looks into her habitat. The rutted path, the cement bowl pond rimed with muck, the red ball lolled against a log, a creature done with being gawked. You knock the glass. A primal indifference twitches her matted back. Elsewhere, the exhibit's clear. Children trail the trauma of their voices through the turnstiles as evening wallows in their wake. Some garish bird clocks out the day. The bear slouches in shadow, ridiculous and vaguely human, and you lean closer, nothing more than attention's ghost. One paw fidgets idly at her knee. The bears you came to see as a child must be dead. Not the ones in books you read, though, that were never alive. They'd come back if you wanted them. The dead stay dead. You peer at your hands, how they fold and pucker into mouths, kiss off the little lips tell each other, toothless and cruel. Above, loudspeakers announce what they always announce at this hour. It hasn't occurred to the guard that you'll be here, pressed to your own side of the glass, inches from the bear drawn into herself as though you're not here. Her black fur splayed against the same transparency, resisting your touch. Wait long enough, and curiosity becomes trespass. Like watching a woman in a restaurant nudge the blunt nub of her nipple into an infant's mouth to quell an inconsolable anger. See how the black bear stares into her paw, upturned now in the sprawl of her lap, with the preoccupation of a reader. Your mother used to read with that intensity. It bristled a thicket around her. Mother, mother. Some other voice had her ear, calling her another direction, into wilderness. No trail you knew led there. She held her grief the same way, paged through as though the lost was a story she wandered into, childlike and alone. The empty bowl was for her, the broken chair, remnants to be claimed, sorted, dog-eared. You left her there. The door closed like an opening book when you went outside to skirt the edge of a woods and thrash the understory with a broken stick. Okay, and so now, the last poem not only is a new poem, which is cool and hard, so perhaps, but it's also the longest poem I'm going to read, which, you know, that terrible trick. People always love to, there's something deeply satisfying as poets come up and say, just one more poem, but this one's 25 pages. This one is not 25 pages, though, so you're saved, you're saved. This is a poem called The Bird and the Statue, and I suppose what you need to know here. Well, the one thing you might want to know is that there's a place described in the latter half of the poem that actually exists a ways down the road on 45. It's a place in Dallas, but we don't begin in Dallas. But just keep thinking about that as we arrive there. But here's the bird and the statue. Away and back, the bird spent its hours fluttering from the statue's high collar, then settling again, preferring, it seemed, one shoulder to the other. Or it bobbed its head with each strut beneath the oversized ear, cooing, conspiratorial in its devotion. Gray and brown, a broken black ring draped around its neck, a white ring closed around its eye. The bird purred its ugly song to the great head, the deaf ear full of one gray thought. And so, one of the statue's shoulders was more streaked with white, like milk carelessly spilled, detailing the folds of a coat open across a chest full and impervious as we're meant to see the state. But people in the square rarely looked up on their way home, or to work, or to wait in the lines. Seasons shifted, shortages with them, milk, bread, patience. Was it the same bird always? Who would study a pigeon ruffling itself beside Lenin's overblown face, stark as a bulb with its filament burnt out? Who could tell it was the same bird, hour after hour, day after day? A pigeon will live 5 years. A state will live until, well, it falls. One day, a crowd came to wrench the statue down, unbuckle it from the square. The statue wobbled, teetered like a drunk as the crowd rocked against it, and the bird stayed away, settling for a bare tree, a branch stripped of leaves. Was it winter? Or late fall, the hint of another season leaning in like gossip? What mattered was that something was over. a regime, a Cold War, a century, or most of one. Onlookers throng the square, scarves pulled tight, mouths open a bit. Someone's tooth hurt with the cold, with something gone rotten in his mouth. Someone raised a child to look on what at last came down. Even the thief, whose hand brushed like snow through a forest of thighs, turned when the statue grated and groaned from its perch. So, where the great shoulder had stood, a sharp breeze. Where the great ear had curled in, the white chalk of daylight passed through to scratch off the hours. Where the song had burbled, where habit had marked its devotions. Perhaps a new statue will come in its place. Perhaps the bird will find a new shoulder, a new ear, a new song with which to profess its diligence. But my thoughts are elsewhere, with Lenin strapped to a flatbed truck, grit flushing his nostrils as he crossed borders changed again, yet to be mapped, on to the sea, to the swaying dark of a ship's hold, mumbling for undifferentiated days and nights toward a far port. Then American highways, lit billboards flitting like pages in the hands of someone too distracted to read. In a Dallas backyard, he's raised again on a shaded path among an assembled crowd. Ceausescu and his wife, Elena, Stalin and Mao, even his own double at the far end, though smaller, more human in scale, one arm raised toward some other future than this. A collection. I can't take you there. The statues are private now. Our petting zoo, the owner would say if you met him, though it's unlikely you will, or that he'd speak to someone like you. If you did go, you might look at the statues basking in afternoon light and wonder what's been transposed to another key, translated into the lush drawl of late spring. Not nostalgia, but power. Not preservation, but a kind of forgetting. Perhaps you've noticed the birds clustered in the prune trees on the statues, starlings mostly. The gardener chases them off at dusk with noisemakers that pop like guns, a minor uprising in the grass below the trees, not the end of an era, but a moment of rest. But birds are simple. They return to the crepe myrtle lolling its miniature tongues, the lavish pink almost too much, and to the shoulders and foreheads, the locks of hair, anything still enough to hold them above the ground ooling with dark. Today, there will be a party. People will trail across the lawn, drinks in hand, to see the stone and metal faces that came down in anger, or shame, or joy. Smaller and larger than life, arranged as curiosities. Laughable, even. For now, the gardener climbs a ladder to scrub shit from one great shoulder and sings below the giant ear a song in his own tongue he heard babbled by the radio this morning as his wife swabbed a new mess his daughter had tipped across the table, as he poured the last of the milk into the recovered cup, as the baby laughed and spilled her milk again.